In the spring of 1906, San Francisco was the crown jewel of the Pacific. A city of boundless ambition, teeming with life. A testament to American modernity. Grand buildings like the U.S. Mint stood as symbols of unshakable strength. A city that believed its foundation was as solid as rock. But that belief was about to be shattered.
Because what rose from the rubble wasn't just a story of survival. It was a secret, brutal order. This is the hidden history, the part left out of the heroic tales. A proclamation signed by the mayor, authorizing soldiers to kill any person found looting. No trial, no jury, just summary execution in a city already on fire. Welcome back to Old West Unseen. Today, we uncover the story of how San Francisco's greatest disaster unleashed a terrifying war on its own survivors.
The Great Quake of 1906 lasted less than a minute, but its violence was absolute. This photograph, taken from a captive airship 2,000 feet up, shows a city grid scoured clean by fire. Nearly 500 city blocks. Over 28,000 buildings were gone. The scale of the destruction was almost incomprehensible.
Nowhere was the collapse more symbolic than at City Hall. Once a monument to civic pride, it was now a hollowed-out skeleton. The very seat of government had been decapitated, its steel bones exposed to the sky. In an instant, the city wasn't just broken, it was leaderless.
The Earth's power was so immense it became absurd. At Stanford University, the statue of renowned scientist Louis Agassiz was thrown from its perch and plunged headfirst into the pavement. A local professor wryly noted it was a mercy he was a geologist, as he was now in his element.
But for those on the ground, there was no humor. Entire buildings, their foundations turned to liquid, simply gave up. Structures leaned at impossible angles, threatening to collapse with the slightest aftershock. To walk these streets was to navigate a death trap, a world that no longer obeyed the laws of physics.
As the fires spread, a mass exodus began. People fled with only what they could drag through the rubble-choked streets. These trunks didn't just hold clothes. They held the last remnants of an entire life, a physical anchor in a world that had come completely undone.
For many, there was nowhere to go. All they could do was stand and watch. Here, on a street yet untouched by the flames, families look back at the smoke, consuming their neighborhoods. In their eyes, you see not just fear, but the profound shock of witnessing the end of your world in real time.
Over 200,000 people were left homeless, more than half the city's population. Parks and military reservations like Fort Mason transformed overnight into sprawling cities of canvas. This wasn't temporary camping. For months, this was home for tens of thousands of refugees.
Survival became the only occupation. With all commerce destroyed, aid distribution centers were established, creating scenes like this. Rich and poor alike stood for hours in bread lines, their former status erased by fire and dust. The disaster was a great and terrible equalizer.
And in this desperation, the authorities greatest fear emerged: looting. For some, it was criminal opportunity, but for countless others, it was simply scavenging for food, water, or medicine from shattered storefronts. It was this act, this desperate search for essentials, that would soon carry a death sentence.
Into this vacuum of power stepped Brigadier General Frederick Funston. Acting without orders from Washington, he declared a de facto state of martial law. Funston was a man of action, and he saw a city descending into chaos. He believed only an iron fist could restore order.
Soon, his troops were patrolling the burning streets. But these were not just rescue missions. Look closely. They carry rifles with fixed bayonets. They were there to impose order, and they would be given the ultimate authority to do so. The city was now under military occupation.
The civil authority for this military power came from Mayor Eugene Schmitz. He was a popular figure, a former orchestra leader. He was the one who signed the proclamation, but he was not his own master.
Because the mayor and the entire city government was secretly controlled by this man, Abe Ruef, a brilliant, corrupt political boss who ran City Hall as a criminal enterprise. And here lies the ultimate brutal irony. The order to kill citizens for petty theft was issued by a regime of the city's greatest thieves.
With the kill order in effect, the ruins became even more menacing. On Market Street, the city's once bustling artery, every shadow could hide a threat. Was that armed man a soldier, a vigilante, or a criminal? In the chaos, there was often no way to tell.
On Nob Hill, the opulent mansions of railroad barons were reduced to what survivors called the tombstones of San Francisco, lone brick chimneys. This concentration of wealth made it a prime target for patrols. Here, a man salvaging his own property could easily be mistaken for a looter and shot.
Landmarks of luxury, like the world-famous Palace Hotel, were now just hollow shells. The order to kill was fundamentally about protecting property like this.
And the message from the men in charge was clear. The city's assets were more valuable than the lives of its desperate citizens. Places of joy, like the Orpheum Theater, fell silent, their emptiness echoing a new reality of fear.
Not even houses of God were spared. The ruins of St. Boniface Church stood as a testament to the fact that there was no sanctuary from the destruction. In the days that followed, there would be no sanctuary from the new, brutal law either. For some, the disaster was pure opportunity. Here, men sell souvenirs salvaged from the ruins of Chinatown. This community was hit especially hard, and Boss Ruef immediately schemed to prevent them from rebuilding on their valuable land, revealing the cold opportunism that flourished alongside the chaos.
The very ground was treacherous. On Valencia Street, the roadbed collapsed into a sinkhole, twisting trolley tracks into scrap metal. This deep instability mirrored the state of the city itself, a society whose foundations had utterly failed.
Streets like O'Farrell became canyons of debris. Navigating these paths was a slow, dangerous process. A wrong step could mean injury, and lingering too long could attract the unwanted attention of a patrol.
The destruction was indiscriminate. This was once a children's playground in Golden Gate Park. The sight of a child standing before the wreckage of a place meant for their joy is a particularly haunting reminder of all that was lost.
And death was everywhere. In the first chaotic days, victims were buried in temporary graves in public parks like this one. Weeks later, the grim task of exhuming the bodies for proper burial began. The living and the dead shared the same space. A final, terrible consequence of the cataclysm.
In the aftermath, the system needed a scapegoat. The wealthy men who paid the bribes and the supervisors who took them were granted immunity. Only one man went to prison for the city's corruption: the puppet master, Abe Ruef. His fall was a public spectacle, a convenient distraction from a much darker truth.
The official history tells a story of heroic resilience, of a city rising from the ashes. But the true number of those killed under the authority of that proclamation was never counted. They remain ghosts in these ruins. Thank you for venturing with us into the unseen. The past is filled with these hidden stories, and your curiosity helps us uncover them. What story should we investigate next? Let us know in the comments. If these echoes resonated, a like and subscribe ensures you won't miss our next journey. Until we meet again,